Vesper Dune woke up coughing like a cheap engine trying to start on a winter morning. Her last memory was curling up with a paintbrush and a bottle of gin, both of which seemed utterly useless now as she blinked against the blinding light of an unfamiliar room. Cryo-sleep hangovers, she recalled, felt as pleasant as kissing a cactus. "Welcome back to the land of the living, MS." "Dune," said a voice so slick and oily it could have greased a warship. A figure loomed over her, a tall, slender silhouette with an unmistakable air of legal disdain. Vesper squinted. "And you are my executioner or just a bad dream?" "Ilax, your lawyer," he responded with the kind of smile that usually accompanied bad news. "You've been summoned." "Summoned?" She sat up too quickly, her head spinning like a drunken top. "By who?" "The future, the Galactic Council," Ilax replied, sounding like he was explaining the obvious to a particularly slow child. Vesper rubbed her temples. Funny how they never mentioned the likelihood of courtroom drama in her art school brochure. And why exactly does the Galactic Council give a damn about one underpaid, over-caffeinated artist? Ilax pulled up a chair, flipping open a holographic screen with the flourish of a magician revealing a rabbit. "It appears that your art has had unintended consequences." "Unintended consequences," Vesper echoed, glancing at the screen where various alien worlds were depicted in chaos, thanks to her paintings. "Indeed," Ilax continued, utterly unfazed. "Your work has been destabilizing alien societies across the Milky Way." "Well, I always thought my art was revolutionary," she snorted, "but this is ridiculous." Ilax didn't so much as blink. "Your last series, Melancholy of a Dying Planet, sparked an existential crisis in the Algonquin cluster. Their culture has completely stagnated." Vesper ran a hand through her hair trying to process this absurdity. "And that's a problem because they were a thriving civilization," Ilax explained with the patience of someone who'd practiced this speech in the mirror. "Now they're too busy contemplating their navels to function." "I probably could have used some of that back in college," Vesper mused. "So what's next, a public flogging, or do I just have to say sorry to a bunch of aliens?" "You stand trial before the Galactic Council," Ilax said, leaning forward with an intensity that suggested he might actually care. "They're considering extreme measures against Earth." "Extreme measures?" Vesper laughed, though it sounded more like a choked sob. "What, like sending us to bed without dessert?" "More like erasure from existence," Ilax replied, not missing a beat. "So yes, dessert may become quite irrelevant." Vesper blinked, her sense of humor failing her for a moment. "You're serious?" "Deadly," Ilax confirmed, his smile never wavering. "But there's good news." "Oh, there's good news," Vesper said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do I get a free spaceship with this trial?" "You get me," Ilax replied, standing with a flourish. "The best lawyer in this quadrant." Vesper couldn't resist the easy jab. "How many lawyers are in this quadrant?" "One," he answered wryly. "Me." She chuckled despite herself, marveling at the absurdity of it all. "All right, Ilax. Let's save the world with art." Ilax nodded, a glint in his eye that suggested he found the whole thing as amusing as she did. "We'll begin your orientation immediately. The trial is in 3 days. Orientation. Are we talking flashcards and motivational speeches? More like crash courses in galactic law and survival tips for when things go south." Vesper sighed, swinging her legs off the cryopod and landing on the floor with a thud. "Well, wake me up before you go, or when you need me to paint something." Ilax laughed. "You'll find this is all more engaging than it sounds. Besides, the fate of Earth hangs in the balance." She offered a wry smile, the situation settling over her like an ill-fitting coat. "No pressure, then." As Ilax led her through a corridor that seemed designed by someone who'd never heard of color outside of sterile white, Vesper couldn't help but ask, "So, what happens if I bomb this trial? Do I get sent back to cryo-sleep or just executed on the spot?" "Neither," Ilax replied, glancing over his shoulder. "You'd likely end up as a living example of human failure in some alien exhibit." "Great," she quipped. "A fate worse than death." "Precisely," Ilax agreed with a nod. Now let's discuss your defense strategy. Vesper followed him, her mind a whirl of disbelief and reluctant excitement. It wasn't every day you got to defend your entire species with nothing but a paintbrush and a knack for stirring the pot. So, she asked, trying to lighten the mood, any chance I could paint the courtroom walls? Might help with my existential dread. Ilex actually chuckled at that. I'll see what I can do, Ms. Dune. They arrived in a vast chamber filled with more buttons and screens than she could count. Ilax gestured to a seat that looked suspiciously like it might eject its occupant at any moment. Sit, he commanded with the authority of someone who didn't hear no very often. Vesper obliged, eyeing the array of holographic projections with a mix of awe and trepidation. So this is where the magic happens. This, Ilax said, waving a hand grandly, is where we prepare for the trial of the millennium. Vesper surveyed the room, exhaling sharply. No pressure, right? None at all, Ilax replied, his tone as dry as the Martian desert. Shall we begin? Vesper nodded, bracing herself for whatever came next, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and a wild, inexplicable thrill. Let's do this. But just so we're clear, if I screw this up, I'm blaming the hangover. Ilax grinned. That's the spirit. Vesper sat in the ejection seat look-alike, struggling to shake the cobwebs from her brain, while Ilax activated a series of holographic displays. The screens flickered to life with the enthusiasm of a teenager at a family reunion, each depicting a different alien world in turmoil. Buildings crumbled, societies unraveled, and at the center of it all was her art. Is it just me, Vesper quipped, or do these aliens have really fragile egos? Ilax didn't bother looking up. It's the nature of highly advanced societies. They spend so much time pondering the universe that one glimpse of a Vesper Dune original sends them spiraling into philosophical oblivion. Vesper leaned forward, peering at a particularly chaotic scene. A group of alien critters was using her latest piece as a rallying banner, their faces a mix of awe and existential dread. I should have started on the existentialism earlier. Might have made college critiques more fun. Your art, Ilax said, his tone suggesting he'd used this line in court many times, acts as a catalyst for introspection. Unfortunately, this often results in societal paralysis or, in extreme cases, complete collapse. Well, Vesper shrugged, they say art is supposed to provoke thought. Ilax gave a humorless chuckle. If only the Galactic Council saw it that way. Instead, they're considering outlawing human art altogether. Outlawing art. Vesper shook her head, the absurdity of it tickling her cynicism. Why not just outlaw thinking while they are at it? With a flick of his finger, Ilax changed the screen to display an official-looking document. Their proposal is as follows. Art created by humans will be illegal to produce, possess, or distribute throughout the galaxy. Vesper couldn't help but laugh, though it was the sort of laugh you gave when you're on the edge of a breakdown. So what? Am I supposed to be the last artist standing? Hopefully not, Ilax replied, unfazed by her discomfort. If we win this case, human creativity can continue to thrive. And if we lose, she asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it aloud. Then you'll have to find a new medium, Ilax said dryly. Perhaps interpretive dance, Vesper snorted. Yeah, right. I'd sooner juggle flaming chainsaws. Ilax turned back to the screens, his expression serious. Our goal is to prove that human art, despite its impacts, adds value to the galaxy. Your art specifically. Vesper scratched her head, feeling the weight of the universe resting heavily on her shoulders. No pressure. Just gotta save human creativity with a few brush strokes. Exactly, Ilax replied. But you'll need to familiarize yourself with galactic politics. They are unlike anything on Earth. Galactic politics, Vesper groaned, memories of dull history classes surfacing. I barely survived Earth politics. Think of it as one of your abstract paintings, Ilax suggested, a chaotic blend of egos and agendas. The analogy was apt, though it offered little comfort. Any chance there's a guidebook on galactic politics for dummies? If only, Ilax sighed, finally showing a crack in his slick demeanor. But we've got something better, me. Vesper arched an eyebrow. And what makes you the expert? I've navigated more legal minefields than you've had hangovers, he said with a wry grin. Impressive, Vesper admitted. I've had some legendary hangovers. Ilax smirked, the kind that suggested he knew more than he let on. Let's start with the basics. The Galactic Council is composed of representatives from all major societies. Think of them as a dysfunctional family trying to agree on pizza toppings. Sounds delightful, Vesper said, her voice thick with sarcasm. And they're the ones deciding the fate of human art. Indeed, Ilax confirmed, pulling up a list of council members. Each has a vote, but they're all swayed by different interests. Vesper scanned the list, her eyes glazing over at the alien names. Let me guess, bribes and blackmail. Officially, no, Ilax replied. But politics are politics no matter where you are. Great, Vesper said with an exaggerated sigh. So how do we convince them to let us keep our brushes and canvases? We'll appeal to their self-interest, Ilax explained. Many alien societies have benefited from human art even if they don't realize it. Makes sense, Vesper said, scratching her chin. Everyone loves a good painting even if it makes them question their existence. Ilax nodded. Exactly. And if we can demonstrate art's positive influence, we might sway enough votes. And if we can't, Vesper asked, already dreading the answer. Then Earth will become an artless void, Ilax said, his voice devoid of humor. And you'll be out of a job, Vesper sighed, leaning back in her chair. No pressure. None whatsoever, Ilax agreed, returning to the screens. Now let's talk about your defense strategy. Defense strategy? Vesper asked, intrigued despite herself. Are we talking legal jargon or epic speeches? More like creative persuasion, Ilax replied. We need to show them the value of human creativity in a way that resonates, Vesper chuckled. So, no legal jargon then. Good, because I'd rather eat paint than speak lawyerese. Ilax smiled. We'll focus on your strengths, your art, your passion, your ability to make people think. Think or overthink, Vesper quipped, gesturing to the chaotic alien world still displayed. Both, Ilax said firmly. But first, we need to familiarize you with the Council's key players. All right, Vesper agreed, feeling a reckless sort of determination. Let's meet the dysfunctional family. Ilax gestured to the holographic screen where a gallery of alien faces appeared. First, we have Chairman Grack, a stickler for tradition. He'll be hard to win over, but he respects logic and precedent. Sounds like a blast at parties, Vesper commented. Ilax smirked before moving on. Then there's Councillor Vithras of the Orlax Consortium. They're always looking for economic advantages. Money talks even in space, Vesper observed. Precisely, Ilax affirmed. Next, Councillor Zara, the cultural savant. Impress her with the depth of human expression and we might gain an ally. An alien with taste, Vesper mused. I like her already. And finally, Councillor T-Chlor, Ilax finished. He's skeptical of human influence but open to persuasion. Vesper nodded, absorbing the information. So, we've got a traditionalist, a capitalist, an art lover, and a skeptic. Sounds like the start of a bad joke. Or the key to our success, Ilax replied. Use their differences to our advantage. Divide and conquer, Vesper asked, smirking. Something like that, Ilax said, his tone conspiratorial. If we play our cards right, we might just pull this off. Vesper felt a thrill of excitement mingling with her anxiety. The stakes were astronomical, but she couldn't deny the challenge appealed to her rebellious spirit. All right, Ilax, let's save art and stick it to the Galactic Council. Ilax nodded, his expression finally softening. That's the spirit, MS. Dune. The day churned on, Ilax diving into a crash course on galactic law, alien psychology, and the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy. It was the kind of lecture that would make an insomniac grateful for their condition, and Vesper struggled to keep her eyelids from succumbing to gravity. Tell me again, she asked during a particularly dense segment on treaty precedents, why this is relevant to painting. Because, Ilax replied with the patience of a saint or a serial killer, understanding the legal framework will help you navigate the arguments against your art. Great, Vesper muttered, doodling surrealistically on a scrap of paper. I'll just replace my paintbrush with a gavel. Ilax didn't miss a beat. If it makes you feel better, there's an entire subcommittee devoted to artistic expression. Thrilling, Vesper drawled. Maybe they'll hang one of my pieces in their office. Ilax chuckled softly. Unlikely, but we can dream. Iors bled into more Iors, and by the time they wrapped up, Vesper felt like her brain had been dragged through a black hole and spat out the other side. But there was a fire in her belly she hadn't felt in ages, the kind that came from knowing she had a chance, however slim, to change the galaxy's view of her passion. So, she declared, standing and stretching her arms above her head, what's next? Do we go door to door convincing these counselors to give us a chance? Not exactly, Ilax said, gathering his notes with the efficiency of a robot. But you'll have opportunities to engage with them. Most are eager to meet the artist who's caused such a stir. Lucky me, Vesper replied, feigning enthusiasm. So do I just dazzle them with my charm and wit? Preferably, Ilax answered with a slight smile. Though you might want to tone down the sarcasm. Vesper sighed dramatically. And here I thought sarcasm was universal. Not quite, Ilax replied, leading her out of the chamber and into another long, sterile corridor. But your passion is infectious. Use that, Vesper nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation all over again. I've got 3 days to convince the galaxy that art is worth saving. No big deal. Exactly, Ilax said, his confidence a steadying presence. And remember, I'm here to ensure you succeed. They paused outside a set of massive doors, the kind that looked like they'd take a battering ram to open. What's in there? Vesper asked, curiosity piqued. The council chamber, Ilax replied, his tone suddenly somber, where your fate and the fate of human art will be decided. Vesper stared at the doors, feeling a chill creep up her spine. No pressure then. None at all, Ilax agreed, his expression unreadable. Are you ready? Vesper squared her shoulders, the weight of her responsibility sinking in. Ready as I'll ever be. With that, Ilax tapped a panel on the wall, and the doors swung open with a groan that echoed through the corridor, like the universe itself was holding its breath. As they stepped inside, Vesper couldn't help but feel like she was walking into a gladiatorial arena. The chamber was vast, filled with rows of alien delegates that watched her every move. It was as if she was an actor stepping onto a stage, and the audience was waiting to see if she'd deliver a performance worth watching. MS. Dune, Ilax whispered, his voice barely audible. Remember what you're fighting for. Vesper nodded, taking a deep breath as she followed Ilax to the center of the chamber. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she held her head high, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw her way. It was time to paint her masterpiece, one last time. Vesper Dune had always believed that art was a form of rebellion, a way to challenge perceptions and incite thought. But as she stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, she realized that her abstract brushstrokes had stirred up more than a philosophical debate. The way those alien eyes bore into her, you'd think she'd painted a masterpiece of mass destruction. The chamber was a who's who of interstellar politics, filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Each delegate was more peculiar than the last, a collection of tentacles, exoskeletons, and things that made her question the sanity of the universe. They didn't look impressed or amused. Ilax, her reluctant guide and newfound partner in cosmic crime, whispered in her ear, "Just a friendly reminder, MS. Dune, don't screw this up." "Gee, thanks, Ilax," Vesper replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was planning on leading us into galactic obscurity." He smirked, but his eyes were serious. "Remember our strategy, charm them with passion, not sarcasm." "Right," Vesper said, taking a deep breath. She turned back to face the council members, each of whom seemed to be judging her life choices. Chairman Grack cleared his throat, a sound reminiscent of 2 rocks grinding together. "MS. Dune, you stand before this council accused of cultural disruption on an interstellar scale. How do you plead?" "Not guilty of intent," Vesper replied, her voice steady. "Though I admit I didn't foresee art as a weapon of mass hysteria. A ripple of amusement, or indigestion, she couldn't be sure, passed through the assembly. At least she had their attention. Grack nodded slowly, like a glacier contemplating a move. Proceed. Vesper launched into her defense, speaking of art's intrinsic value, its ability to inspire and challenge. She spoke of beauty and chaos, of human creativity as both a boon and a bane. The trick, she realized, was balancing sincerity with enough wit to keep these extraterrestrial dignitaries from dozing off. And while my work has caused unintended reactions, she continued, it has also sparked dialogue and introspection. Isn't that the purpose of any great art? A few delegates nodded, though whether in agreement or sleep, who knew? That's when Zither made his entrance. Vesper had heard whispers of him, a diplomat who had a fondness for human music, the kind that made you want to smash a guitar against an amp. Zither, a gangly creature with a face like a melted clock, leaned forward. "Ms. Dune, might I inquire if your artistic endeavors extend to music?" Vesper blinked, momentarily thrown. "Well, I've dabbled, mostly screaming into a mic in my garage." To her surprise, Zither chuckled, a sound like wind chimes caught in a tornado. "Ah, the human spirit. I own a few compositions myself. They're quite invigorating." "Thank you, I think," Vesper replied, wary of the compliment. At least she had one ally in the room, however unconventional. "Prosecution, present your evidence," Chairman Grack boomed, turning the spotlight away from Vesper. A reptilian creature slithered forward, clutching a stack of holographic displays. "Exhibit A," it hissed, projecting an image of a planet engulfed in chaos. Riots, unrest, all sparked by Ms. Dune's so-called art. Vesper watched as scenes unfolded before the council. Alien crowds clashing, structures aflame, a society unraveling over abstract interpretations. It was chaos choreography, and she was the unwitting conductor. "Exhibit B," the prosecutor continued, showcasing another world, this one grappling with philosophical crises. Entire civilizations plunged into existential dread. Vesper winced. She'd known her work could be unsettling, but this was beyond her wildest expectations. She could almost hear Ilax's voice in her head, "Told you so." The gallery of alien faces stared at her, some with curiosity, others with contempt. "Ms. Dune," the prosecutor sneered. "Do you deny the impact of your work?" "I don't deny its impact," Vesper replied, voice strong despite the weight of accusation. "I only ask you to see beyond the chaos to the potential for growth." Zither nodded subtly, a small gesture that buoyed her spirits, but it was hard to feel optimistic with the damning evidence projected for all to see. Her art was a double-edged sword, cutting both ways. And right now, it felt like it was aimed at her own jugular. Chairman Grack turned his stony gaze back to her. "How do you respond to the charge that your art is a catalyst for civil disorder?" Vesper took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Art is a mirror, reflecting society's truths and fears. If my work has incited unrest, perhaps it's because it forces us to confront uncomfortable realities." The room was silent, the kind of silence that felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. It wasn't the thunderous applause or resounding approval she needed, but it was something, a crack in the wall of opposition. Ilax leaned in, his voice a whisper. "You need more than philosophy, Vesper. Show them what's at stake." She nodded, turning to face the council once more. "Every civilization grows through challenge. My art might provoke disorder, but it also inspires evolution." A ripple of murmurings echoed through the chamber, delegates whispering in languages that sounded like they'd been sampled from a cosmic DJ set. Some were intrigued, others skeptical. No surprise there, belief was a hard sell to a room full of cynics. "And if we ban human art," Zither interjected, eyes glimmering with something akin to mischief. "What then?" "Then we lose a vital part of our shared experience," Vesper answered, her voice steady. "We lose the ability to question, to grow, to challenge the status quo." Chairman Grack leaned back, considering her words. "The council will deliberate. You will be summoned when a decision is reached." Vesper nodded, her heart pounding like a bass drum in a metal band. As she turned to leave, Zither caught her eye, a subtle nod of encouragement, an unexpected ally in a room filled with skeptics. Out in the corridor, the heavy doors closed behind them with a finality that made Vesper's stomach clench. She exhaled, feeling like she'd been holding her breath since she walked into the chamber. "Well," she said, trying to muster some levity, "that went about as well as a paint fight in zero gravity." Ilax chuckled, though there was an edge to his amusement. "You did well, considering the evidence stacked against you." "Thanks for the pep talk, Coach," Vesper replied, rubbing her temples. "Any advice for when they call us back in?" "Stay focused. Play to your strengths," Ilax said, exuding the kind of calm that made her want to punch him. "Great. I'll just paint my way out of this mess," Vesper quipped, though the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her shoulders. They walked in silence through the maze of corridors, each step echoing with the gravity of the situation. Vesper knew the stakes, knew that her art was on trial, but so was her spirit. She had to convince not just the council but herself that what she did mattered. "Ilax," she said suddenly, needing to break the silence. "Do you think they'll really ban human art?" He hesitated, a rare crack in his confident facade. "It's a possibility, but you've got allies." "More than you think," Vesper nodded, the memory of Zither's nod of support lingering in her mind. "Let's hope they're enough." They reached the waiting area, a sterile room with all the charm of a hospital waiting room. Vesper sank into a chair, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity on an overworked planet. She needed sleep, needed rest, needed to find a way to turn the tide in her favor. "You've got some time before they call us back," Ilax said, settling into a chair across from her. "Use it wisely." Vesper nodded, eyes closing as she leaned back. She'd used the time to think, to plan, to find some way to blend her cynicism with hope. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, a brief respite before the storm of judgment descended once more. And as she drifted into a light doze, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of painting this whole mess would make. Something abstract, no doubt. Chaotic and beautiful, much like the path she'd chosen to walk. In her dream, the council chambers transformed into a gallery filled with her work, every piece a testament to the chaos and beauty of human creation. The delegates wandered, some gazing with awe, others with confusion, but all were captivated. In that world, art was a language spoken by all, a bridge between worlds. She awoke with a start, the weight of reality crashing down once more. The council's decision loomed, a nebulous threat hanging over her. But Vesper was no stranger to challenges. She thrived on them, needed them like oxygen. "Ready?" Ilax asked, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Vesper nodded, determination hardening her resolve. "Ready as I'll ever be." With a deep breath she stood, ready to face the council once more. Ready to defend her art, her passion, and the chaotic beauty of human creativity. The universe might not be ready for her, but she was more than ready for it. In the sterile waiting room, Vesper Dune sat, her mind buzzing like a broken neon sign. She glanced at Ilax, who was busy fiddling with his holographic screen, pretending to be more interested in alien memes than the trial of the century. Classic Ilax, all nonchalance and charm, like a snake oil salesman on a space station. "So," Vesper said, breaking the monotonous silence, "any brilliant ideas on how to convince the council that my art isn't just a cosmic Molotov cocktail?" Ilax looked up, his expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Oh sure, let me just pull a rabbit out of my ass. Look, Vesper, you've got allies. You just need to remind everyone that your art isn't all doom and existential gloom. Right? Because nothing says peace and harmony like a painting that incites riots," Vesper muttered, rubbing her temples. "Hey, art is a tricky business. Sometimes you just color outside the lines and accidentally start a revolution," Ilax replied, a smirk playing on his lips. Vesper chuckled despite herself. "Maybe I should have stuck to finger painting. Finger painting might have caused a few planetary coups if you were involved," Ilax shot back, raising an eyebrow. Vesper leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Okay, suppose I spin this. I focus on the growth, the evolution. How some societies were positively transformed by the same art that's got everyone else frothing at the mouth. Ilax nodded, his face finally serious. Exactly, we need to highlight those cases. Show them that your art is like a double-edged spork, Vesper snorted. A spork? Hey, it's versatile, like your art, Ilax reasoned. Think about that colony on Tygo's Roman 7. They used your art to rethink their approach to governance. Ended a 300-year-old dictatorship just by staring at one of your paintings. Yeah, and all I was trying to do was capture the feeling of being stood up on a date, Vesper said, shaking her head. Intent is overrated. Impact is what matters. Play that angle, Ilax advised with a wink of mischief. Before Vesper could retort with something snarky, the doors to the council chamber loomed open like the maw of some bureaucratic beast. An attendant gestured for them to re-enter. Round 2, Vesper muttered, rising to her feet. Just remember, Ilax said, following suit, despite appearances, these are people, or what passes for them. They're just as screwed up as us, maybe even more so. Use that to your advantage. Vesper took a deep breath, steeling herself. Time to make some art with my words. Back in the council chamber, the atmosphere was thicker with tension than a black hole's buffet line. Chairman Grack's stony visage was as inscrutable as ever, though there was a hint of impatience in the set of his jaw. MS. Dune, he began, voice resonating through the chamber like a death knell, we have examined further evidence. More historical precedents where art has catalyzed societal disintegration. Vesper nodded, swallowing her nerves. And I can present instances where the opposite occurred. It's a fine line, Ilax whispered, though his tone was one of support rather than doubt. The prosecution, a reptilian creature that looked like it could use a good moisturizer, slithered forward again. Members of the council, Exhibit C, it announced, projecting another holographic display. This one showed a planet in the throes of economic collapse, triggered by a piece of Vesper's art that had gone viral. Your art caused their currency to become worthless overnight, the prosecutor hissed with satisfaction. Vesper watched as the scene played out, feeling like she was witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. She had painted that piece after a particularly bad day at work, never expecting it to become an interstellar sensation. That one was supposed to be a commentary on the absurdity of modern life, Vesper said, trying to keep her voice light. Instead, it became the straw that broke the camel's back, the prosecutor replied, enjoying the moment a little too much. Vesper took a deep breath, ready to counter. But let's talk about the colony on Tygo's Roman 7, she said, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who'd just bet everything on red. They used my work to inspire change, to break free from oppression. If art can cause chaos, it can also spark enlightenment. The chamber rippled with murmurs, an ocean of opinions rising and falling like the tide. Chairman Grack raised a hand, silencing the crowd. Continue. Art isn't just about beauty or chaos, Vesper said, finding her stride. It's about the possibility of change. Sometimes that change looks like a mess, but it's growth. It's evolution. It's the universe trying on a new pair of pants. Zither, ever the champion of chaos and humanity, leaned forward. A rather unique metaphor, MS, Dune, but not without merit. Thank you, Zither, Vesper replied, feeling a small surge of gratitude. Look, I never intended to cause harm. I only wanted to hold a mirror to the universe, to show it what it could be, not just what it is. Chairman Grack's eyes narrowed, calculating the weight of her words. And if your intentions are misunderstood, if your art continues to incite disorder, then maybe the problem isn't the art but what it reveals, Vesper countered. Art brings the hidden to light. If societies can't handle a little illumination, maybe they are the ones that need to change. The silence that followed was palpable, the kind of silence that could cut glass. Vesper could almost hear the gears turning in the minds of the elders, grinding against centuries of tradition and caution. Ilax leaned in, whispering, "Keep pressing. You've got them on the ropes." Vesper nodded, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. Chairman Grack, if you ban human art, you don't just silence a voice, you stifle potential. You extinguish the chance for growth, for understanding, for connection. Bold words, Grack said, though there was no malice in his tone. But words must be backed by deeds. Then let my deeds speak, Vesper replied, steeling herself for whatever came next. The council's deliberation was an exercise in patience, a marathon of stares and whispered debates. Vesper felt like she was on trial for her very existence, her every breath weighed and measured. Finally, Grack raised his hand, calling for silence. The council requires time to consider these matters further. We will reconvene once a decision has been reached. Vesper exhaled, relief and dread coiling together like snakes in a pit. She had made her case, but the outcome was far from certain. Come on, Ilax said, leading her toward the exit with a reassuring pat on the back. You did good. Now we wait. Outside the chamber, Vesper sagged against the wall, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on her shoulders. Well, that was a ride. Yeah, like surfing a black hole, Ilax replied, leaning beside her. But you handled it, they listened. Vesper nodded, allowing herself a flicker of hope. You think they'll see reason? Ilax shrugged, a half-smile on his lips. I've seen stranger things. Besides, you had Zither eating out of the palm of your hand. That's got to count for something. Hope so, Vesper said, pushing herself off the wall. Because if they decide to ban human art, it won't just be my problem. It'll be a loss for the entire galaxy. Ilax chuckled, his laughter like a bomb on her frayed nerves. Look at you, all altruistic. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Yeah, well, don't spread it around, Vesper replied, rolling her eyes. I've got a reputation to maintain. They walked the corridors, their steps echoing in the quiet. For now, all they could do was wait and hope that the council saw the truth in Vesper's words. As they reached the transport bay, Vesper paused, looking up at the vast expanse of stars beyond the observation deck. You know, she said, her voice softer, I always thought art was my way of leaving a mark on the universe. Never imagined it would cause so much chaos. Chaos isn't always bad, Ilax said, following her gaze. Sometimes it just means you're doing something right. Vesper smiled, a small flicker of warmth amidst the cold uncertainty. Guess we'll find out soon enough. And with that, they disappeared into the depths of the station, two figures bound by fate and the unpredictable path of art in the cosmos. The Galactic Council chamber was starting to feel like a dentist's waiting room, sterile, overly bright, and filled with an uncomfortable anticipation of pain. Vesper and Ilax had been sitting in the damn waiting room for what felt like eons. Vesper idly wondered if the furniture was designed by someone whose primary goal in life was to make people as uncomfortable as possible. Vesper looked sideways at Ilax, who was fiddling with his holo screen, probably looking at alien memes to pass the time. It was his way of coping, she supposed, like watching space kittens prance around on tiny hoverboards while the universe imploded. You know, she muttered, if this is what fame feels like, I'm ready to trade it for a quiet life as a potato farmer. Ilax chuckled, not looking up from his screen. A potato farmer, huh? Sounds like a plan. Just you, a field of dirt and existential dread. Think of all the potatoes you could traumatize. Vesper snorted. I'd probably end up creating some sort of potato revolution. That's just my luck. Spud uprising of 3034, Ilax said, deadpan. Led by the infamous Vesper Dune, I can see it now. The starch will rise. Their banter was interrupted when the chamber doors creaked open and an attendant beckoned them in again. It seemed the council hadn't had enough of their charm and wit. Inside, the air felt denser, the kind of atmosphere that could choke a black hole. Chairman Grack was still perched on his high throne, flanked by counselors who looked like they'd been carved out of the hardest rock in the universe. Only, rocks were less judgmental. As Vesper and Ilax took their places, Grack cleared his throat, a sound reminiscent of a rusty engine trying to kickstart. We have a new development, he began, voice as smooth as sandpaper. Counselor Zither has agreed to provide testimony regarding the impact of human art. Vesper's heart sank like a lead balloon. Zither, the one counselor who seemed even slightly on her side, about to spill the beans. Perfect. Zither stepped forward, his gait slow and deliberate, like an executioner readying his axe. The room hushed, an audience and a jury both eagerly awaiting the show. "Well, this should be as fun as a root canal," Ilax whispered, leaning in. Vesper forced a smile. "If by fun you mean agonizing," Zither began, his voice calm, measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed counselors, I stand before you not as a critic of the human species, but as an observer. Vesper Dune's art has indeed caused ripples across our galaxy." Vesper braced herself, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. She was about to be dissected, her work scrutinized like a bug under a magnifying glass. "Her art," Zither continued, "has the power of a supernova capable of illuminating even the darkest corners of our societies. Yet it is this very potency that makes it dangerous." Vesper's stomach twisted. Dangerous. The word hung in the air like a noose, tightening with every breath. Zither paused, surveying the room. "But," he said, and the tension in the room crackled like static, "isn't the danger worth the potential it brings? We cannot deny the chaos, but we must also acknowledge the growth, the questioning of norms, the evolution it incites." Vesper's pulse quickened. Was this a lifeline or just another way to tighten the noose? Chairman Grack's expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the predatory glint in his eyes. "And what do you propose, Counselor Zither? Should we allow chaos to reign under the guise of potential?" Zither's gaze met Vesper's for a fleeting moment, a silent communication passing between them. "I propose that we do not act out of fear. Banning human art would be a disservice to our own growth. Instead, we should guide its influence, not stifle it." The room erupted in murmurs, a cacophony of opinions clashing like swords. Vesper felt a sliver of hope, fragile as a newborn star. But as Zither stepped back, the weight of the council's judgment bore down heavier than ever. Chairman Grack leaned back, fingers steepled, a picture of contemplative malice. "We will take your suggestion under advisement, Counselor Zither. But the matter remains contentious." Vesper wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all. Instead, she stood her ground, her voice steady. "I appreciate your support, Counselor Zither, but I can't help but feel like a pawn in a game where the rules are constantly changing." Ilax nudged her, his whisper tinged with sarcasm. "Welcome to politics, where the only certainty is uncertainty." The session adjourned, leaving Vesper and Ilax to stew in the aftermath. As they made their way back to the waiting room of doom, Vesper couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that clung to her like a second skin. "Do you think Zither's testimony will make a difference?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ilax shrugged, his usual nonchalance a poor disguise for the worry in his eyes. "I don't know, but you've got to believe it will, otherwise what's the point?" Vesper sighed, the fight draining out of her. "I just hate feeling so powerless, like I'm watching my life get flushed down the cosmic toilet." Ilax gave her a crooked smile. "Hey, maybe it'll clog the pipes. Ever think of that?" His attempt at humor was appreciated, but it couldn't dispel the cloud of doubt hovering over her. If even Zither was being pressured, what chance did she really stand? Back in the waiting room, the silence was oppressive, a constant reminder of the waiting game they were trapped in. Vesper's mind was a whirlpool, thoughts and fears tumbling over each other. "I guess it's all in the hands of the gods now," she said, folding her arms, trying to shield herself from the chill of uncertainty. "More like the hands of bureaucrats," Ilax corrected. "And trust me, they are worse." Vesper couldn't help but chuckle, a small flicker of humor breaking through the gloom. "Right, because when have bureaucrats ever made a mess of things?" Ilax grinned, his optimism a lifeline in the storm. "Exactly. Maybe it's time to start believing in miracles." Miracles. The word felt foreign on her tongue, an alien concept in a universe that thrived on chaos and unpredictability. They sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on their shoulders. Vesper felt the knot of fear tighten in her chest, an unwelcome companion that refused to let go. "Do you ever think about what you'd do if it all went to hell?" she asked, not entirely sure she wanted an answer. Ilax considered the question, his gaze distant. "Probably take up knitting or become a professional meme creator." Vesper laughed, a genuine sound that broke through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. "I'd pay to see that." "You're assuming you'd have any money left," Ilax retorted, eyes twinkling. Vesper sobered, the reality of their situation crashing back down. "Yeah, there's that." As time dragged on, the waiting room became their universe, a limbo of uncertainty and doubt. Vesper felt the isolation keenly, a sharp edge that cut through the bravado she tried so hard to maintain. In the end, it all came down to a roll of the dice, a cosmic gamble that could tip the scales towards salvation or ruin. And all Vesper could do was sit and wait, hoping against hope that the universe was listening. As they waited, the atmosphere shifted, a subtle change that sent a shiver down Vesper's spine. It was the calm before the storm, the moment when silence became the loudest sound of all. The door to the waiting room opened, and an attendant stepped in, their expression as inscrutable as ever. "The council is ready for you." Vesper and Ilax exchanged glances, the weight of the moment hanging in the air like a suspended sentence. It was time to face the music, to find out if their gamble had paid off or if they'd just been playing a losing hand. As Vesper rose to her feet, Ilax gave her a reassuring nod, his faith in her unwavering. "No matter what happens, you've already won in my book." "Thanks, Ilax," Vesper said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind in her heart. "Let's see if the universe agrees." They walked the familiar path to the council chamber, each step echoing with the gravity of the moment. Vesper felt the weight of expectation pressing down, a burden she carried willingly for better or worse. The chamber doors loomed ahead, a gateway to the unknown. Vesper took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited them on the other side. As they entered the chamber, the silence was palpable, a living entity that wrapped around them like a shroud. The counselors sat in their elevated seats, their expressions unreadable, their verdict a mystery that hung in the air. Chairman Grack rose, his presence commanding, a figure carved from stone and resolve. MS. Dune, after careful deliberation, the council has reached a decision. Vesper's heart pounded, the moment stretching into eternity. She braced herself, her mind a whirl of possibilities, each one more daunting than the last. "The council has decided," Grack continued, his voice steady, "to allow human art to continue, under the condition that it is monitored closely to prevent further disruption." Vesper's breath caught, disbelief warring with relief. It wasn't a clear victory, but it was hope, a lifeline in the darkness. "However," Grack added, his gaze piercing, "should further incidents arise, we will not hesitate to reconsider." Vesper nodded, the gravity of his words sinking in. It was a reprieve, but one with strings attached, a reminder that the battle was far from over. As the session concluded and the chamber emptied, Vesper and Ilax lingered, the weight of the moment settling over them like a second skin. "You did it," Ilax said, a grin breaking through the tension. They listened. Vesper exhaled, a mix of relief and determination coursing through her veins. "Yeah, but it's a hell of a responsibility." "That's art for you," Ilax replied, his tone light yet sincere. "A beautiful mess." As they made their way back to the waiting room, Vesper felt the burden of expectation lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. It wasn't the end, but it was a start, a chance to prove that art was worth the chaos it brought. And as they stepped out into the vastness of space, Vesper couldn't help but smile, her spirit lighter than it had been in a long time. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time she felt ready to face whatever came next. Vesper leaned against the cold metal wall of the waiting room, the texture biting into her shoulder blades like a reminder of the fight she'd just been through. She felt like she'd been to hell and back, and all she got was a lousy participation trophy in the form of conditional freedom for her art. Ilax, ever the comedian, was busy fiddling with his holo screen, his fingers dancing over the device like a conductor directing a symphony of alien memes. "You know," he said, not looking up, "if they ever make a movie about this, I'd like to be played by someone with a better sense of humor. Vesper snorted. Good luck with that. I hear the casting directors in this part of the galaxy are particularly blind. Huh. Just like the Galactic Council's taste in decor, Ilax retorted, casting a disdainful glance around the sterile room. I've seen morgues with more personality, she chuckled, the sound almost foreign after the tension of the council meeting. You've got to admit, though, there was a certain charm to Chairman Grack's threats. Like listening to a crocodile practice motivational speaking. Ilax grinned, eyes still glued to his holo screen. Yeah, if the universe ever needed a good laugh, we've got the perfect comic duo. As much as she appreciated Ilax's levity, Vesper couldn't shake the weight of the council's decision. She could continue her work, her life's passion, but with a leash firmly around her neck. It was the kind of victory that felt more like a consolation prize. A beep from her personal comm device snapped her out of her thoughts. The message was from Counselor Zither, a surprising ally in this jungle of bureaucratic nonsense. Meet me in the archives, the message read. There's something you need to see. Vesper showed it to Ilax, raising an eyebrow. Looks like we've got a mysterious benefactor. Or a trap, Ilax said, his grin unfazed. Either way, it's more interesting than sitting here counting ceiling tiles. The archives were tucked away in the bowels of the building, a labyrinthine collection of knowledge that made most libraries look like a child's picture book. The air was thick with the smell of dust and ancient data pads, the kind of place where secrets came to die, or to be resurrected. Zither was waiting for them, standing beside a holographic display that showed an image of Earth long before humanity took to the stars. A time when art was just as likely to be painted on a cavern wall as it was in a digital gallery. You made it, Zither said, his expression more relaxed than during the council meeting. I thought this might interest you. Vesper approached the display, curious despite herself. What's this about? Zither tapped a control, and the image shifted to a series of artistic masterpieces, each one a testament to the human spirit's resilience. These are works from Earth's history. Art that has inspired revolutions, resisted oppression, and given hope when there seemed to be none. Vesper felt a shiver of recognition as she looked at the images. It's incredible, she breathed, the weight of the council's decision momentarily forgotten. Our art has always been chaotic, hasn't it? Chaotic, yes, Zither agreed, but also transformative. It's why I believe in your work, Ms. Dune. Even if the council has reservations, art has a way of changing the universe, one brushstroke at a time. Ilax leaned in, squinting at a particularly vivid painting of a stormy sea. So you're saying all we need is a few good paintings and maybe the universe won't go to hell in a handbasket? Zither chuckled. It's more about what those paintings represent. A spark of change, a challenge to the status quo. Vesper studied the images, each one a testament to art's power. She thought of Tygo's Roman 7, how her work had helped topple a dictator, and the way it encouraged a society to rethink its governance. Maybe she wasn't just a troublemaker after all. Maybe there's hope yet, she said, voice tinged with newfound determination. If art could inspire that kind of change on Earth, maybe it can do the same out here. Zither nodded, his expression earnest. I believe it can, and I believe you can be the catalyst for that change. Ilax crossed his arms, looking at the images with an appraising eye. Well, if that doesn't give you a warm and fuzzy feeling, I don't know what will. Vesper couldn't help but smile, the burden of her responsibility feeling just a bit lighter. Thanks, Zither, for everything. Don't thank me yet, Zither replied, his tone laced with a hint of warning. The council's decision is far from unanimous. There are those who would see human art erased altogether. You have allies, but you also have enemies. Vesper nodded, the reality of her situation settling in once more. I know, but at least now I know who my friends are. As they left the archives, Vesper felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since the council first called her art into question. It wasn't just about proving her worth to a bunch of bureaucrats. It was about showing the universe that art, her art, mattered. In the corridors outside, the younger council members gathered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and support. They'd seen the presentation, the legacy of Earth's art, and it had struck a chord. MS. Dune, one of them said, a tall alien with skin like polished marble, your work has opened our eyes. We stand with you. The words were a balm to Vesper's weary soul. It seemed that in the shadow of bureaucracy a new hope was taking root. Thank you, she said, her voice carrying the weight of newfound purpose. I won't let you down. As they walked away, Ilax nudged her with a sly grin. Looks like you've got a fan club. Vesper laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the sterile hallways. Great. Maybe they'll buy my future work. You know, just in case the whole council thing doesn't pan out. They made their way back to their quarters, the path ahead uncertain but not nearly as daunting as before. Vesper knew the battle was far from over, but she was ready to face it head-on. What's next on the agenda, O fearless leader? Ilax asked, slinging an arm around her shoulders in a gesture of camaraderie. I guess we keep doing what we do best, Vesper replied, her steps confident. Create, inspire, and maybe, just maybe, change the universe. Ilax nodded, his usual humor tempered by sincerity. Sounds like a plan. And if it all goes to hell, there's always potato farming. Vesper chuckled, the knot of anxiety in her chest loosening just a little. Yeah, I'll hold you to that. As they moved through the corridors of the council building, Vesper felt the weight of her responsibility, but it was tempered by a sense of hope she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. In the end, art was more than just a mirror to society. It was a hammer to shape it, a tool to carve out new possibilities. And as Vesper Dune, artist and accidental rebel, she was ready to wield it with everything she had. But in typical fashion, the universe wasn't done throwing curveballs just yet. As they rounded a corner, a familiar face appeared, Chairman Grack, looking every bit the bureaucrat carved from granite. MS. Dune, he greeted, his voice a gravelly rumble that could have doubled as a demolition crew. I trust you're satisfied with the council's decision. Vesper bristled but kept her tone civil. It's a start, but you know as well as I do that the fight's far from over. Grack nodded, his expression unreadable. Indeed. Just remember, the line between chaos and progress is razor thin. Vesper met his gaze evenly. Maybe, but it's a risk worth taking. We've been playing it safe for too long. Grack studied her for a moment, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. Then I suppose we'll see where this path leads. Don't disappoint us, MS. Dune. As Grack moved past them, Ilax rolled his eyes dramatically. Man, I love a good pep talk from a stone statue. Vesper chuckled, the tension of the encounter dissipating into the air. Let's just hope it doesn't come back to bite us. Hey, if it does, at least we'll have a front row seat, Ilax quipped, his humor undaunted. And I hear galactic politics is a hell of a show. They continued down the corridor, the faint hum of the building's systems a comforting reminder of the universe's steady, chaotic march forward. Vesper felt ready to face whatever came next, her heart buoyed by the unexpected support she'd found among the council's younger members. Back in their quarters, Vesper and Ilax settled in, the glow of the city's lights casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The weight of the day still lingered, but it was tempered by the hope of what could be. You know, Ilax said, breaking the comfortable silence, for a moment back there I actually started believing in miracles. Vesper smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. Me too, and if we're lucky maybe we'll get to see one. Or cause one, Ilax suggested, his grin infectious. Or cause one, Vesper agreed, feeling lighter than she had in days. As they sat together, their laughter mingling with the hum of the city beyond, Vesper knew they'd only just begun to fight. The path ahead was uncertain, but with allies at their side and a fire in their hearts, anything was possible. And with that thought, Vesper Dune, artist, rebel, and unexpected hero, was ready to challenge the universe and paint a new future, one vibrant, chaotic, and undeniably human. The Galactic Council chamber was a bright, sterile expanse where hope and cynicism came to brawl it out like drunken gladiators. Vesper stood at the podium, feeling less like a rebel artist and more like a piece of meat under a heat lamp, ready to be roasted by the galaxy's most prestigious and notoriously long-winded bureaucrats. Ilax lounged off to the side, his holo screen flickering with alien memes that seemed far more entertaining than the spectacle unfolding before him. "You know, Vess," he whispered, "I hear if you stare at those counselors long enough, they turn to stone. Or maybe that's just what happens to your brain." Vesper smirked, but her eyes were fixed on the audience, a colorful collection of alien species, some of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, like being probed by a xenobiologist with a shaky hand. "Just remember," she murmured back, "if I get vaporized, you're next on the docket." Chairman Grack cleared his throat, a sound reminiscent of rocks grinding together. "MS, Dune, the council awaits your defense. Make it inspiring." "Thanks, Grack," Vesper replied, her voice dripping with enough sarcasm to fill an interstellar cargo freighter. "I'll try not to disappoint." Taking a deep breath, Vesper activated the holographic display behind her, filled with vibrant images of art from Earth's tumultuous history. The kind that started revolutions, ended monarchies, and made people really question their life choices, like buying a third yacht. "Art," she began, "isn't just a luxury for bored billionaires. It's the spark that sets the world on fire." The images shifted to Tygo's Roman 7, where her art had incited the citizens to overthrow a dictator with all the enthusiasm of teenagers at a rock concert, minus the questionable fashion choices. "Take Tygo's Roman 7, she continued. "My work didn't just topple a regime, it made a community rethink how they wanted to be governed. It united them in the kind of solidarity you usually only see when someone tries to pass the bill at a group dinner." Counselor Zither, one of Vesper's few allies, leaned forward, nodding along with the zeal of a student teacher who hadn't yet realized how soul-crushingly dull the job would become. "Art challenges us," Zither interjected. "It forces societies to look inwards and question their own values. And it makes some of the best memes," Ilax added, earning a round of laughter from the younger council members who were clearly ready for a break from the usual dry proceedings. Vesper pressed on, sensing the tide was beginning to turn. "Every piece of art is a conversation. A dialogue between the creator and the viewer that transcends language, culture, and yes, even species." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showcased a series of artworks that had sparked change across various planets, each one a testament to the power of human creativity. "Art has never been about playing it safe," she declared. "It's about pushing boundaries, exploring new ideas, and pissing off the powers that be. Because sometimes, the only way to move forward is to have someone shove you from behind." There was a murmur of agreement from the audience, though Grack's expression remained as stony as ever. Still, Vesper could see the cracks forming in the council's resolve, like the first sign of daylight through a window after a long, dark night. "But what about the chaos?" one of the older counselors demanded, their skin a mottled shade of grumpy beige. "The riots, the unrest," Vesper nodded, acknowledging the concern without missing a beat. "Sure, art can cause chaos, but chaos isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the catalyst for change. Besides," she added with a wry smile, "the universe was a mess long before I came along." A few council members chuckled, and even Grack's lips twitched in what might charitably be called a smile if you squinted and used your imagination. Vesper decided to drive the point home with a live demonstration. She tapped a control on her personal comm device, and the holographic display shifted to a live feed from a nearby colony that had been inspired by her work. The citizens were gathered in an open square, their faces a mix of species and colors, all united by the same purpose: to create, to share, to be part of something greater than themselves. "Look at them," Vesper said, gesturing to the screen. "They're not rioting. They're celebrating. They're coming together through art, finding common ground where there was none. This is what art does. It builds bridges between worlds. There was a pause as the council absorbed her words. The silence stretched out, heavy with anticipation, like the moment just before someone hit the play button on an old-school jukebox. Then slowly at first, but with growing momentum, members of the council began to nod, some even clapping their hands or equivalent appendages in appreciation. "MS. Dune," Zither said, his voice carrying a note of genuine respect, "you've given us much to consider. Art in its many forms has the power to unite us, to remind us of our shared humanity, or shared whatever we are," he added with a nod to the more exotic members of the council. Chairman Grack stood, his granite-like demeanor softened just a fraction. The council recognizes the potential of human art, not as a threat but as an opportunity. We will not seek to erase it but to protect and understand it. Ilax couldn't resist leaning in and whispering, "Guess we won't be getting vaporized today. Bummer, I've got a killer insurance policy." Vesper exhaled, relief washing over her like a much-needed shower after a week in the desert. "Thank you, Chairman. I promise I won't let you down. As long as you don't start painting nudes of the council," Grack replied with the closest thing to a joke she'd ever heard from him. "I think we'll manage." With that, the council session concluded, and Vesper found herself surrounded by a swarm of reporters and curious onlookers, all eager to get a piece of the artist who had just changed interstellar policy with nothing but a few paintings and a hefty dose of audacity. As they navigated the chaos, Ilax sidled up beside her, holo screen in tow. "So, Vesper Dune, intergalactic heroine, what's next on your agenda? World peace, ending hunger, finally teaching me how to paint." Vesper laughed, the sound genuine and free. "I think I'll start with a nap, then maybe I'll consider saving the universe." "Don't take too long," Ilax teased. "The universe is a messy place without you stirring up trouble." Together, they made their way out of the council chamber, stepping into the bustling city beyond. The path ahead was still uncertain, littered with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time in a long while, Vesper felt a sense of hope. She wasn't just an artist or a rebel, she was part of something bigger, a movement that might just change the universe for the better. As they walked through the city, the lights casting long shadows that danced like specters along the walls, Vesper knew she had allies, friends who believed in her and her work. Her art wasn't just her passion, it was her weapon, her voice, her way to make a mark on the universe. And with that realization, she felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with nothing more than creativity and a whole lot of courage. "Ilax," she said, glancing over at her friend. "You really think we can change things?" He grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief and a touch of that unyielding optimism she had come to rely on. "If art can change a rock like Grack, I'm betting it can change just about anything." Buoyed by his confidence and her own renewed determination, Vesper found herself smiling as they continued onward, the future not quite as daunting as it had seemed mere hours ago. Because in the end, art wasn't just about creating something beautiful. It was about making a difference, one brushstroke, one revolution, one act of rebellion at a time. And if that meant taking on the universe with her trusty paintbrush in hand, Vesper Dune was ready for the challenge. The Galactic Council chamber was as empty as a politician's promises now, the echo of Vesper's defiant speech still bouncing around the sterile walls. She stood there, feeling the weight of the trial lifted, though the whole affair had left a hangover-like throb in her temples. Who needed cryo-sleep when you had the Galactic Council to give you a headache? Ilax was already scrolling through his holo screen, eyes darting between alien memes that were either hilariously incomprehensible or incomprehensibly hilarious. "You did it, Vess," he said without looking up. "You're officially a galactic pain in the ass. They'll probably put your face on one of those don't posters in bureaucratic circles." She snorted. "Yeah, just what I always wanted, to be the poster child for chaos in the cosmos." They wandered out of the chamber into the waiting room where the air was as cold and metallic as the decor. The clatter of chairs and the low hum of distant machinery provided a fitting soundtrack to their victory. Vesper glanced out of a window that could have been a monitor for all the warmth it gave and found herself gazing at the cluster of stars beyond. "So," Ilax broke the silence, "what's next? You planning to keep causing interstellar headaches, or is retirement on the horizon?" Vesper shrugged. "Art's never been about taking the easy way out. It's about stirring the pot, shaking things up, making people see the world differently. So, no retirement. Besides, I hear peaceful retirement planets are just overpriced resorts with bad room service." Ilax chuckled, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Well, you'll always have a place crashing at my asteroid. It's got all the amenities, recycled air, questionable water supply, and a view that'll make you reconsider your life choices." She smiled, the kind of smile that was more for herself than anyone else. "Thanks, Ilax. I'll keep that in mind next time I need a temporary hideout from a mob of disgruntled extraterrestrials." They stepped into the corridor, the murmur of alien languages and the rustle of robes creating a symphony of interplanetary bureaucracy. Vesper's personal comm device vibrated against her hip. A message from Counselor Zither flashed across the screen. "Congratulations on the win. Drinks are on me when you're back on Tygo's Roman 7, if they let you in with your new notoriety." Vesper typed back a quick response, her fingers tapping out a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. "Just make sure they're strong enough to knock out a Grack. I'll see you soon." Ilax peered over her shoulder, eyebrows raised. "Zither, huh? Who knew you'd make friends in such high places? Surprising, right? Turns out some people in power have a soul, even if it's buried under layers of red tape and smugness." They exited onto the streets of the space station, a bustling maze of neon lights and alien architecture that defied gravity and logic in equal measure. Vesper soaked it all in, the sense of possibility hanging thick in the air like the scent of something spicy from a nearby food stall. "Hey, Ves," Ilax said, pulling her out of her reverie. "You ever think about what you're doing this for? I mean, really think about it." She paused, considering his question. "I suppose it's about proving that art matters, that what we create can change things even if just a little." Ilax nodded, a sly grin spreading across his face. "And here I thought you were just trying to outdo Banksy." "Who says I can't do both?" she quipped, nudging him with her elbow. They continued down the street, their path illuminated by the glow of alien signboards and the odd flicker of malfunctioning neon. The crowd was a mix, merchants hawking their wares, travelers discussing the latest hyperlane news, and the occasional robed bureaucrat, looking lost amidst the chaos they claimed to control. "You know," Ilax said, his tone turning thoughtful, "we're all just trying to figure out where we fit in this massive jigsaw puzzle of a universe. You, me, even Grack. Though I imagine he's more of a corner piece, rigid and unable to adapt." Vesper laughed, a genuine sound that cut through the noise around them. "True enough. But maybe it's about making our own puzzle pieces, finding our own corners in the madness, even if we have to hammer them into place." As they turned a corner, Vesper's gaze landed on a mural that spanned the length of a building. It was a vibrant explosion of colors and shapes, a testament to creativity flourishing in a place where conformity was king. She stopped to admire it, feeling a kinship with the unknown artist who had dared to defy the dullness around them. Ilax followed her gaze, his expression softening. "You know, if this whole art thing doesn't work out, you could always become a space graffiti artist. I hear there's big money in smuggling paint across planetary borders." "Tempting," she replied, lips twitching into a smirk. "But I'd rather not add smuggler to my list of titles. Rebel artist has a nice ring to it as it is." The city buzzed with life, and Vesper felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in a while. It was strange, feeling so at home amidst the chaos, but maybe that was the point. She'd always thrived on the edge, where things were unpredictable and vibrant. "So, what's next for Vesper Dune, Galactic Renegade?" Ilax asked, drawing her attention back to him. "I think I'll stick around for a while," she replied, the decision feeling right as she spoke it out loud. "See what trouble I can stir up next. Maybe visit Tygo's Roman 7, see how my art is doing there." Ilax nodded, looking at her with something akin to pride. "The galaxy's not gonna know what hit it." "Good," she said, a note of determination in her voice. "Because I'm just getting started." As they walked on, the city alive around them, Vesper felt a sense of clarity. The trial had been a turning point, a reminder that what she did mattered, even if it wasn't in the way she'd expected. Her art was more than just paint on a canvas. It was a force, a catalyst for change. In this new era, with the Council's reluctant blessing and her own stubborn resolve, Vesper was determined to push the boundaries even further. She'd continue to share Earth's art with the galaxy, to remind every species she encountered of the power of creativity and defiance. And maybe, just maybe, she'd change a few more minds along the way. As they approached the docking bay where her ship waited, Vesper glanced at Ilax, her longtime companion in mischief and mayhem. "You ready to head out?" He shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Lead the way, Captain." "Just promise you won't get us blown up." "No promises," she replied with a grin. "But I'll do my best to keep us in one piece." With that, they boarded the ship, the future stretching out before them like the vastness of space itself. Unknown, unpredictable, but full of possibilities. The engines hummed to life, and as Vesper took the helm, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in ages. The galaxy was big, chaotic, and flawed. But armed with her art and a healthy dose of irreverence, Vesper Dune was ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes the best way to navigate the chaos was to embrace it, to find beauty in the madness and make it your own. And with a flick of switches and a push of buttons, they were off, leaving the space station and the echoes of the trial behind. The stars stretched out before them, a blank canvas waiting for Vesper to leave her mark, one brushstroke at a time. The journey back to Tygo's Roman 7 was mercifully uneventful, a smooth transition through hyperspace that gave Vesper plenty of time to reflect. It was strange, really, how much had changed in such a short span. She'd gone from being a controversial figure to a symbol of something bigger, a movement perhaps, though she hated the self-important ring to it. Ilax was sprawled in the co-pilot's chair, snoring softly, his holo screen still clutched in his hand. Vesper couldn't help but smile at the sight. It was comforting, knowing she had someone she could count on, even if his loyalty came with a side of sarcasm and terrible jokes. The proximity alert pinged, and Vesper leaned forward, bringing Tygo's Roman 7 into view. The planet was a jewel against the blackness of space, its surface alive with the colors of a society in the throes of transformation. Her art had started something here, something she hoped would endure long after she was gone. As they descended through the atmosphere, the comm buzzed with an incoming transmission. Vesper rolled her eyes, knowing exactly who it would be before she even answered. "Zither," she greeted, her voice laced with the kind of exasperation reserved for old friends. "You couldn't wait until we landed." His voice crackled over the line, full of warmth and just a dash of smugness. "I figured you might need a guide." "Tygo's has changed a bit since you were last here," she laughed, the sound mingling with the hum of the ship's engines. "I think I can manage, but if you've got recommendations for a decent drink, I'm all ears." "There's a bar near the square," Zither replied. "Good place. The owner owes me a favor, so your first round's on me. Consider it a welcome-back gift." They touched down on the planet's surface, the ship settling with a gentle thud that spoke of skill and familiarity. Vesper powered down the engines, glancing over at Ilax, who was starting to stir from his nap. "Welcome back to the land of the living," she said, unbuckling her harness and heading for the exit. Ilax stretched, yawning like a cat in a sunbeam. "Ugh, I'm getting too old for these hyperspace jumps. You sure you don't want a nice, quiet life somewhere warm?" "Not a chance," she replied, grinning as she opened the hatch and took in the bustling scene before them. The city was alive with activity, the air filled with the sounds of construction and conversation. Vesper could see the influence of her art everywhere. Murals, sculptures, even the graffiti had taken on a new vibrancy. It was a far cry from the oppressive atmosphere she remembered, and it filled her with a sense of pride she couldn't quite put into words. Zither was waiting for them at the edge of the landing pad, his expression one of genuine pleasure at seeing her again. "Vesper Dune," he said, extending a hand. "You've caused quite the stir." She shook his hand, resisting the urge to make a snarky comment. "Just doing my part to keep things interesting." As they walked through the city streets, Vesper couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging. This was what she'd been fighting for, a place where creativity and community could thrive, where people could be free to express themselves without fear. "So," Zither said, breaking into her thoughts, "is the galaxy ready for more of your brand of chaos?" She met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. "I think it is, and even if it's not, I'm gonna give it to them anyway." With her friends by her side and the spirit of her art guiding her, Vesper knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but she was ready to face whatever it threw at her. Because sometimes, the only way to survive the madness was to dive in head first and make it your own. And in the end, wasn't that what art was all about?